So, good evening, everyone. I'm Anita, the Joint Secretary of NIPM Calicut, and on behalf of NIPM Calicut Group, under the able guidance of NIPM Kerala chapter, I extend a very warm and hearty welcome to the second session of this four-session Labor Code series. As you all know, after the grand success of our first session, that is Code on Wages, here we are, all the HR professionals gathered together for the second session, that is the session on Code on Social Security. And as you all know, our speaker, expert speaker for this session is a personality who is well known among the HR fraternity, none other than the labor law expert, Sri Varkiyachan Peta. Ladies and gentlemen, our event sponsor for this session is Great HR, and our event partners for the session are Calicut Forum for IT, that is CAFIT. We have Calicut Management Association, CMA. We have Benefico, and we have JCI Calicut. So without much ado, let us move on to our session, Code on Social Security. Let me invite with great pride, great honor, the chairman of NIPM Calicut Group, Mr. Prashant Kumar. Sir, requesting you to deliver the welcome address and introduce our esteemed speaker.
Thank you, Mrs. Anita, for the wonderful introduction. So you have set the mode for the entire session. So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Most respected Mr. Varkiyachan Peta, today's expert faculty, Mr. Laljon, Chairman, NIPM Kerala Chapter, Mr. Anish Aravind, Secretary, NIPM Kerala Chapter, Captain Haridas, President CMA, Mr. P.T. Harris, Chairman CAFIR, Mr. Gogul of Great HR, Mr. Kushal Agarwal, President JCI Calicut, Mr. Sinju Thomas of Benefico, esteemed members of NIPM Kerala Chapter, NIPM Calicut Group, and our enthusiastic participants. A very warm greetings and a very hearty welcome to all of you. As you are aware, the recently enacted 4 labor codes are going to seriously impact all organizations, employees, and especially HR professionals. The National Institute of Personnel Management and NIPM Calicut Group had conducted a workshop on Code of Wages in the last month as an online platform. The program was a great success, as Mrs. Anita was quoting, by participation and by knowledge sharing to all the stakeholders like professionals, employers, and employees. As you are aware, the Code on Social Security covers EPF and Miscellaneous Provisions Act, Employees State Insurance Act, Maternity Benefit Act, Payment of Gratuity Act, etc. Total 9 acts are brought into the umbrella of Code on Social Security. So very important thing. The Code on Social Security will result in fundamental changes in the existing labor laws, and those who fail to be updated of such drastic changes will land into serious problems, litigations, and punishments, penalties, etc. It is in this context, in order to update and better equip all the stakeholders, NIPM Calicut Group, with the able guidance of NIPM Kerala Chapter, is presenting today an online session on Code on Social Security. Today, we are blessed, we are lucky to get Mr. Varkiyachan Peta, who have 4 decades of glittering professional experience to lead our session. My dear friends, I introduce to you the most energetic, enthusiastic, and versatile speaker, Mr. Varkiyachan Peta, and I respectfully request him to start his session at the earliest. Thank you.
Respected Chairman of Calicut NIPM Group, Sri Prashant Kumar, Sri Lal John, Chairman, and Mr. Anish Aravind, Honorary Secretary of NIPM Kerala Chapter, Mr. N. Firoz, Honorary Secretary of NIPM Calicut Group, Mr. Unikrishnan from Great HR, and very senior HR professionals. Of course, my colleagues like Mr. Girish, Mr. Babunath, Mr. Augustine, Mr. Saji Matthew, very, very senior people are attending this program. In fact, I am honored, especially by the words of the chairman. And the second time also they have invited me to make this presentation. So it is really an honor. I am really thankful to the Calicut NIPM group. Anyway, I will straight away go to the subject matter. Those who have attended the earlier program or any of my program may have a fair idea of how the codes have come into being, the genesis of these labor codes. For the benefit of others who are participating for the first time, I will just briefly introduce how these codes have come into being. See, the multiplicity of labor legislations was always a problem in India. There are about 44 central labor legislations. And you know, this labor is a subject matter in the concurrent list. If you look at the Constitution of India, there is a 7th schedule. In that 3 lists are there: central list, state list, and concurrent list. Concurrent list means both the center and the state can enact legislation. Therefore, there are 44 central labor legislations, but more than 150, nobody knows the exact number, nobody knows, more than 150 state legislations are there. So that means even if an organization wants to fully obey and comply the provisions, it is not practically not possible. It was a problem with not only for employers, it was a problem for employees, consultants, advocates, even the courts. Because in the different act, even the employees is defined differently, wages is defined differently. So it was a felt need to consolidate, amalgamate, and simplify these labor legislations. Therefore, when second National Labour Commission under the chairmanship of Ravindra Verma was formed in 1999, you know, Ravindra Verma was a central labor minister in Morarji Desai's government from 1977 to 79. When the second National Labour Commission was formed, one of the main reference to that commission was to make recommendation on how to amalgamate, simplify, and rationalize the various labor legislation. The commission has submitted its report in 2002 to Vajpayee government. In fact, the commission's recommendation was to codify these labor legislations under 5 headings. That is wages, industrial relations, social security, safety, and working conditions. But after many deliberations, government has decided to consolidate these labor legislations under 4 headings. What they have done is the 4th and 5th one was made one code. That is how these 4 codes have come. So 4 codes are Code on Wages, Code on Industrial Relations, Code on Social Security, and Code on Occupational Safety, Health, and Working Conditions. This altogether subsumes 29 labor legislations. Code on Wages 4, Code on Industrial Relations 3, Code on Social Security 9, and Code on Occupational Safety, Health, and Working Conditions 13. So 4 plus 3, 7, 7 plus 9, 16, 16 plus 13, 29. So 29 central labor legislations are going to disappear. And once this is implemented, only 4 codes will be there. So as far as the implementation of these codes are concerned, all codes have been passed by the parliament. The consent of the president is obtained. It is published in the Gazette. So that means it has become the law. It has become the legislations, acts in this country. Only thing, the effective date is to be declared. As far as the implementation of its rules, every procedure aspect is completed. Now that has to be placed before Parliament, and again it has to be published in the Gazette, and effective date is to be given. The government is planning to implement these codes in toto from 1st April 2021. They have already taken steps. You know, they recently, December 18th, there was a notification that section 42 of the Code on Wages has been given effect, because to formulate that committee, because unless the minimum wage, the floor wage is declared, you cannot implement all these things. So government is one by one, they are going ahead with the implementation of these codes. So today we will be discussing Social Security Code, which comprises of 9 important labor legislations. These are, the first one, Employee Compensation Act 1923, Employee State Insurance Act 1948, Employees Provident Fund and Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1952, the Compulsory Notification of Vacancies, Employment Exchange 1959, Maternity Benefit Act 1961, Payment of Gratuity 1972, Senior Workers Welfare Fund Act 1981, Building and Other Construction Workers Act 1996, and Unorganized Workers Social Security Act 2008. These are the 9 acts which is going to disappear, and only in that place, only the Social Security Code will be there. The acts, especially at least 3 or 4, Provident Fund, ESI, gratuity, maternity. These are the acts which require a seminar of this type. Each subject requires, because that much importance is there for all the organizations and also for all the HR managers. So mainly today in this session, we will discuss what are the changes. If time permits, we can go into existing details also. See, these Social Security codes, I already told you, it contains Provident Fund, it contains ESI, it contains Maternity Benefit Act and Payment of Gratuity. So these acts are very much concern of the employer and also the employee. Only thing, it is in 2 different counts. The employer is very much concerned because these are the acts on which he has to spend money every day. Take Provident Fund and ESI. There is no other act. The employer has to spend money every day. The moment a worker or an employee is recruited, 12% of his wages as employer contribution, 0.5% of his wages as administrative charges, 0.5% of the wages towards the EDLI, then 3.25% towards ESI. So 16.25% of his salary every day, the employer has to fill out. So that is why it is really, employers are concerned with this code. Employees are also very much concerned because It is the benefit for them. It is the old age protection for them. So the Social Security Code is very, very important for the employers as well as employees. Now, we will go one by one. What are the major changes? See, all HR managers, please please go through the schedule number 1 of this code, because this is the first time you are getting a consolidated statement of the applicability of various acts. See, otherwise, suppose you want to find out what is the applicability of Provident Fund, you have to take the Provident Fund and go through the section of OIC. Once you start employing 20 employees, the Provident Fund Act will be applicable. So what is the applicability of Maternity Benefit Act? So again, you have to go through the act and find out. So this is the first time consolidated statement at one place. Please go through the schedule number 1. It has only 3 columns. That is, first column is chapter number, second is chapter headings, and third one is applicability. It's very clearly stated there, and in one schedule, everything is available. So there is not much change with respect to applicability. Provident Fund 20, PSA 10, gratuity 10, maternity 10. So there is not much change. But there are certain small changes, but with great impact. For example, the applicability of Provident Fund. One of the condition is that, okay, 20 workers, everybody know. But one more condition was there, that industry should be included in the schedule of the Provident Fund Act. Because many are not aware, because when we started practicing, most of the industries has come into the schedule. But when Employees Provident Fund Act was enacted in 1942, it started with 6 industries, 6 basic industries like cement, steel, tobacco, etc. Then one by one, the industries were added to the schedule. So unless the central government put a particular industry into the schedule, even if there are 20 employees or more employees, the Provident Fund Act is not applicable, was not applicable to that particular industry. In fact, there were a lot of litigations. One of the main litigation recently, not recently, years back, was with respect to a mineral water industry. It happened in Gujarat. See what happened? The Provident Fund inspector went for the inspection. He found out that more than 20 people are working in the mineral water industry. So he initiated prosecution. The matter went up to the High Court of Gujarat. Then the employer said, this mineral water industry is not included in the schedule. Or summoned experts. Actually, what was included was aerated industry, that is soda, cola, etc., etc. So finally, the court accepted the contention of the employer. Yes, aerated water and mineral water, both are different. So it is not applicable. So now, like that, so many disputes also were there. Now what has happened is that the one change is that schedule is abandoned. There is no more schedule. Any industry, any business, any trade, any undertaking, any manufacturing, the moment it starts employing 20 or more people will be covered under the program. So this is first change. Second change, very, very subtle change. probably many may not have been noticed, but big impact. That is, if you go through the Provident Fund Act, the existing one, the applicability part, what is stated is, it applies to establishment employing 20 or more persons. So who is that person? It is not 20 or more workers. It is not 20 or more employees. It is written that 20 or more persons. So many disputes. At the same time, in the act, the person is not defined. Many disputes went up to Supreme Court. For example, there was a company where 19 employees and one managing director was there. So if you include managing director also, yes, it is 20. But whether managing director is included in the definition of person, that was the dispute. So finally, the matter went up to Supreme Court. And Supreme Court has held that if the managing director is drawing salary, then he is to be counted. Suppose he is not drawing salary, he need not be counted. Then another dispute, that is whether partners comes under the purview of person. Again, fortunately, it didn't went up to Supreme Court. It went up to many high courts. So high courts in their verdict has held that no, partner, whether drawing salary or not, he need not be counted. If 18 employees and 2 partners are there, no, the industry, the establishment is not covered. So that is another change. The person has been removed. In that place, employee has been added. But all these, why I have told these judgments, all these things will be applicable because still in the ESI, the applicability part, it is stated person. Only in PF, it is changed employees. Then another important thing is one exception with respect to the applicability of ESI. ESI, we know it is applicable only if 10 employees are there. But in this code, special provision is brought in that if it is a hazardous industry, then even if there is only 1 employee, that establishment is coverable under ESI. Then there is provision for voluntary coverage. Okay, what is the status now with respect to Provident Fund and ESI? As far as Provident Fund is concerned, the voluntary coverage provisions are in existence. Only thing, majority of the workers or employees and the employer should jointly submit an application. But there was no provision for ESI for voluntary coverage. So now that provision for voluntary coverage is extended to ESI also. But there are certain differences. As of now, you voluntarily cover your establishment under PF. Then after some time, suppose you want to come out, there is no provision. It is forever. But now certain changes has been made. See, now it is very good because, see, if you employ a small contractor, always as HR managers, if you want to protect your establishment, please engage contractors having independent PF and ESI code. Otherwise, you are responsible. You will land in trouble because both the PF and the ESI states it is the responsibility of the principal employer to cover the employees of contractors under Provident Fund and ESI. That is the legal position. That is what is stated in the Act. That is there in the code also. Then you can ask a question, is there any provision in the code that suppose the contractor is having separate code number, the principal employer will be absolved of his responsibilities? There is no provision. Then why are you telling that engage only contractors who are having these independent code numbers? There is no provision as of now in the Provident Fund Act and ESI. There is no provision in the Social Security Code that if the contractor is having separate code number, the principal employer will be absolved of his responsibilities. There is no provision. Then why it is stated like that? It is only because of court decisions. So if it comes, there are two important court decisions. One is both the decisions I'm quoting here of the Madras High Court. In 2011, Madurai District Cooperative Bank Limited versus Employees Provident Fund Organization. Madras High Court has held that yes, if the contractor is having separate code number, then principal employer, you cannot catch hold of the principal employer. But remember, there is no provision in the Social Security, and if you search the entire Social Security Code, there is no provision. Again, in 2015, Dex India Limited versus Employees Provident Fund Organization, Madras High Court, through another verdict, reiterated that no, if you cannot catch hold of contractor, in that judgment, the Madras High Court has held that if you cannot recover from him, you can even proceed against the legal heirs, not to the. So these are the two important judgments. So therefore, now it is easy. The earlier, suppose you engage a small contractor, he says, sir, unless there is 10 people, I will not get a coverage. Okay, PF, at least there is a provision that voluntary coverage I will do, but ESI, no. But once this code come, he can cover under the voluntary coverage so that you will be protected. Then there are certain changes. Earlier, I told you, Provident Fund, though there is a provision, once you are covered, you cannot come out. That provision is there with respect to all acts. Section 1(4) of the Social Security Code specifically states whether it is PF, ESI, maternity, gratuity, any beneficial act, once it applicable to an establishment, after that, if the threshold number comes below that threshold number, it will continue to be applicable. There is no exemption. Once it becomes applicable, it is applicable forever. PF, ESI, gratuity, maternity, everything. That is specifically stated section 1, subsection 4 of the SS Code. Now, certain provisions to come out of this voluntary coverage is given in this code. That is, if an establishment is voluntarily covered under PF or ESI, for the first 5 years, no provision, you have to continue. But after 5 years, if majority of the employees and the employer jointly make an application, we don't want this PF and ESI, we want to come out. The Central Provident Fund Commissioner, as far as the Provident Fund is concerned, and Director General, as far as the ESI is concerned, he can allow them to come out. But one rider is, during these 5 years, at any point of time, if they have crossed the threshold, even for a day, then they cannot come out. Then that is also forever. Then another change with respect to ESI is plantation. So far, employees' compensation is applicable as far as the accident and other benefits are concerned. Now, the employer is given an option in this code. If employer wants, he can switch over to ESI. There, it is specifically stated no consent of the employee is required. Only the employer can decide. Suppose he wants to adopt ESI in his establishment, yes, he can go for that. He can make an application. Then it is specifically stated that because plantations, most of this thing, it is always very interior places. So the ESI department may not be ready with the infrastructure, dispensary, hospital, branch office, etc. So it is specifically stated, once the employer gives his consent, then the ESI will establish the infrastructure and that date will be notified. Only from that date onwards, employer and employee need to contribute. Before that, they need not contribute. So this is one change with respect to plantations. Then another major implication which we have to be very careful is that in the definition of insured person, insurable person is also included. Section 42 of the Social Security Code specifically says there can be three conditions. In section 42, it is described. One, non-enrollment. You were to enroll a person under ESI, you did not do. Oh, he is a gardener, left out. He is working in the canteen, left out. And he is a security guard, left out. So you were to enroll him legally, but you did not enroll. One condition. Second thing, you did not enroll, but he met with an accident. Immediately you enrolled him. Immediately on the day of accident or on the next day of accident. The third condition is that you enrolled him, but you did not pay the contribution. Because ESI, if you want to get benefits, especially cash benefits, certain 78 days of contribution is required in the contribution period. So under these three conditions, section 42 specifically says the right of the corporation that they can give the benefits to that employee who were supposed to be covered. Accident treatment, accident compensation. Even if an employee goes to an ESI local office, to the dispensary, with a proof that he is an employee of so-and-so company and his salary is less than 21,000 rupees, they have to give him the treatment. Then the provision is that the capitalized value of that expenditure incurred by the corporation can be recovered from the employer. In that, one condition is there. Just by recovering the capitalized value, employer is not absolved of his responsibilities. All the other things remain as it is. That is, the employer has to pay employee contribution, employer contribution, 12% interest, 25% damage, everything is there. The only thing is, once that dues is calculated, this capitalized value can be adjusted against the dues. For example, your dues are assessed, it is 50,000 rupees. The capitalized value of benefit given to the employee is 25,000 rupees. Then you pay only 40,000. You need not pay this 50 and that 25. But if the capitalized value exceeds the due amount, then you have to pay the due amount. So that is the only consolation for the employer. Then, as far as factory definition for the Social Security is concerned, in the Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions Code, the definition of factory is changed. As of now, factory means where the manufacturing process is carried on with 10 workers with power, 20 workers without power. That, for the purpose of Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions Code, that definition is changed. It has become, instead of 10 and 20, it has become 20 and 40. But For the purpose of Social Security Code, the definition of factory is retained as it is. It is 10 and 20 only. Then another change is the women employees for a long time, they have a request that see they get married, they come to husband's place. If their parents were dependent, they could have been covered under ESI. But there was no provision to cover the father-in-law and mother-in-law. But once they come here, it is their responsibility if they are depending upon them. It is their responsibility. So that is one change. Father-in-law and mother-in-law is included in the definition of family, but the condition is there that for all on the income of those people should not be more than 9,000. And if the income is less than 9,000 rupees and they are dependent on this women employee, then definitely they are also considered in the definition of family. Now, another important thing is fixed term employment. The gratuity provisions are included here. So it is clearly stated that the fixed term employee, even if he do not complete 5 years, is entitled for gratuity. But if you look at the Social Security Code 53 subsection 2, it only says pro rata. You have to give pro rata and 5 years is not required. But in the rule 39, it is clearly stated that unless he has completed 1 year, he will not be entitled for gratuity. But a fixed term employee who has completed 1 year of service is entitled for gratuity. And then further, the same thing is applicable for every completed year of 6 months or more. He has to be paid an year's gratuity. So this is a major change with respect to fixed term employment. Then shop is not defined. It is stated because most of the shop acts are state acts. So it is stated in the Social Security Code. Whatever is defined in the shop act in the respective states, that will stand. Now we'll spend little time. The most important thing, wages. It's now, as of now, it is a total confusion. Normally, definition it is very good. Only now 50% only need to be considered. It is really simplified. But when we go into details, it is more complicated than earlier. It is like that. Because see what happens. Now let us look at what is the definition of wages. The definition of wages in all the 4 codes are same. What it says is, wages means all remuneration, whether by way of salary, allowances, or otherwise, expressed in terms of money, or capable of being so expressed, which would, in the terms of employment, express or implied, were fulfilled, payable to a person with respect to his employment or of work done in such employment, and includes. See, this is an inclusive definition. What is meant by inclusive definition? No definition though. So inclusive definition means it can contain more things than what is apparently seen. Apparently inclusions are basic pay, dearness allowance, retaining allowance, if any. See, some of the definition starts with strike means. You cannot include so many things in that. But inclusive definitions, be careful. Inclusive definitions means it includes means if it starts with it includes or somewhere it is stated that it includes means yes, it can contain more things than what is apparently seen. So wages is a definitely an inclusive definition. So it says and includes basic pay, dearness allowance, and retaining allowance, if any. Because retaining allowance is not there in every company, it's only in the seasonal establishment. Then it says, but does not include 11 items are given. So let us forget 10th and 11th item. 10th is gratuity, 11th is retrenchment compensation and terminal benefits. Then the definition says, if the 9 items A to I, if those excluded items is more than 50% of the total salary, then it will go from the exclusion to the inclusion. Now the problem is many of the things like overtime is included in exclusion. Okay, now everybody is trying to restructure the salary where the union is there. It may not be possible, but other places now people have started restructuring the salary, contain basic plus DA 50% and put the other allowances another 50%. Then the excluded allowances are, one is statutory bonus, another is value of any house accommodation or any amenity like electricity, water, etc. provided to the employee. Then third is the contribution to the provident fund and pension fund. Fourth is the reimbursements, conveyance allowance, any payment based on settlement or award, HRA, overtime, and commission. So if you put these allowances 50%, then where do the overtime will go? It will go to the inclusion part. So really, it requires some more clarification. All the employers association like FICCI, etc., they have taken up the matter. We do not know what is going to happen. And otherwise, unless it is very, very careful, then we will land up in more trouble. It is not a simplification. It is. It seems to be more. It will invite more trouble only. So be careful. So what we can do is, where the basic plus DA is more than 50%, yes, where there is no union, you try to bring it to 50%. Union is there, it is very difficult. You may have to discuss with the union, then only it can be done. It will be a difficult affair. But wherever it is 50%, let it remain like that. Let some more clarity come. But wherever it is less than 50, don't do anything. Because at the most, what can happen? That for any calculation, you have to take 50% of the gross salary. By keeping basic plus DA less than 50%, you are not violating any law. There is no law that basic plus DA should be this much percentage. So if it is less than 50%, don't do anything. Let it remain like that only. Let some more clarity come, then we will decide. Then another important provision which is brought in Social Security Code is, we have told that the provision for registration under the Provident Fund and ESI is there. But as of now, in the Provident Fund and also in the ESI, there is no provision to cancel the registration. Once the establishment is closed, you have to run after the authorities. They will say, where is the return? Where is the statement? Bring that one. So many things. But even then, they will not give in writing that, okay, the registration is cancelled. Because there is no provision. You cannot also go to a court. Because legally, there is no provision to cancel the registration. So, under Section 3, that provision has been brought in. That is, if you are in the process of winding up, it specifically states with respect to Chapter 3 and Chapter 4. Chapter 3 is Provident Fund. Chapter 4 is ESI. You can submit the application for cancellation of registration. The only thing, you have to submit the up-to-date returns and contribution and a self-certified statement is to be filed. Again, otherwise, the problem is, see, suppose the Provident Fund, it is not closed. Even if no employee is there, you have to file the return. Not only filing the return, 75 rupees minimum administrative charge you have to give. Unless you submit that return, then it is another violation. So now, fortunately, this one good thing has come. Section 3 gives provision for the cancellation of the registration, especially Provident Fund and ESI. Then, as far as Provident Fund, there is another good thing. That is, you see, I told you there can be 3 different types of violations under Provident Fund and ESI. Let us discuss Provident Fund. The 3 major violations are: 1, non-enrollment. You were to cover a person, you did not cover him. That is what is called non-enrollment. Then next one, short payment. You covered him, but his wages is 15,000 rupees. You are remitting Provident Fund only for 5,000 rupees. That is what is called short payment. Third one, you have covered him, recovering, but not remitting the money. That is non-payment. So these are the 3 things which can come, violations which can happen, and the authorities can initiate an inquiry which is called the 7A inquiry. Many of you must have very familiar with the 7A inquiry, because there are very few companies with, who have not faced the problem of Provident Fund and ESI. So 7A inquiry is the inquiry through which the dues are assessed. You have to pay employer contribution, employee contribution, 12% interest, and once it touches 6 months, 25% per annum. So once this is decided, actually there is a provision under 7B and 7C, and 7B and 7C is also scrapped. But what is the 7B and 7C? Many of people, we do not know what is 7B. 7B is that there was a provision, or there is a provision given today. Once the 7A assessment is over, you can request for a review. But seldom people go, because it is review, not appeal. The review is done by the same person. So therefore, generally, there will not be any change. Then there was another section 7C. That is, even if the 7A inquiry is over, within 5 years, the authority who has conducted the inquiry can again reopen the case. And if something is left out, he can again charge. It was only, the purpose served was only harassment of employers, nothing else. So both 7B is discarded and 7C is also discarded. Now that is not there. Now, the only option is, after 7A inquiry, that in the new code, it is under section 125. Once that is over, you approach the tribunal. The tribunal constituted by the central government, industrial tribunal, will be the appellate tribunal for the PF. So it will continue like that. So there, one problem was there. If you want to go for appeal, you have to remit 75% of the assessed amount. In fact, court had discretion to waive or reduce. But as per the provisions, 75% of the money you have to remit. Then only appeal will be accepted. Suppose your assessment is 10 lakhs, 7.5 lakhs you have to remit. Now, that has been reduced to 25%. you remit only 25%. If 10 lakhs is assessment, you remit only 2.5 lakhs. But at the same time, the discretion of the court is also removed. Earlier, the court had the discretion to waive or reduce, but that is also not there, flat 25%. But even then, it is a good thing. Now you can go for appeal by remitting 25%. Then as far as this gratuity, there is a major change which everybody has to note. See, so far, suppose you don't pay gratuity, what will happen? So far, the punishment was only the interest. You have to pay 10% interest. That too, there is a limitation. It cannot be more than the gratuity amount. That means if somebody is not paid gratuity for 10 years, then after that, there is no liability. So subject to the amount of gratuity, 10% interest was to be given. That was the only punishment. But now you have to be very careful. The first time, there is an added provision that if the gratuity is not paid, then prosecution can be taken against you. 1 year imprisonment and 50,000 rupees fine. So therefore, the gratuity provisions are to be taken very seriously. Another very interesting thing, probably many of you may not be knowing because not faced such a situation. See, in the Employee State Insurance Act, if a worker dies during the course of employment due to an employment injury arising out of his employment, his widow, children, and widowed mother are entitled for dependent benefit. But as of now, if the woman employee dies, there is no dependent benefit for widower. Many, when I was explaining this to many people, they were not aware because they have not faced with such a situation. So as of now, there is no dependent benefit for widower under ESI Act. Now that provision has been brought in. The widower is also brought in as a dependent and he will be entitled for compensation. But it is not on the first line. If the first line people are not there, only the husband will get. That is the children, widowed mother, all these people are not there. Then only the husband will be entitled for dependent benefit. And that too, not to the scale of wife. Wife gets 3/5 of the 90% of the salary. Children get 2/5. Mother, widowed mother also get 2/5. But husband, if these first line people are not there, then only the husband is entitled, and his entitlement is also 3/10 of the full rate. Full rate means 90% of the contribution. So that is one change which has been brought in. Husband is included in the list of dependents. Then this another important thing which we have to be very careful is that the government is going to implement the insurance of gratuity very seriously. What happens? In many occasions, companies get closed down. The employees who have served 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, they don't get the gratuity. But where is the employer? The employer is not, the factory is closed down. So in this Social Security Code, it has been made mandatory that every establishment to which that chapter is applicable should register with the competent authority. And in order to register, that insurance number is mandatory. So you cannot make a registration with the competent authority without an insurance number. You have to get a this gratuity insurance under any one of the insurance company under the insurance regulatory authority. See, actually, all the insurance companies are under the insurance regulatory authority, but we can go only to few insurance companies like LIC, SBI, ICICI, Prudential, etc. Why? The Act says you should obtain this insurance from any one of the insurance company under the insurance regulatory authority. But the problem is all these 25 insurance companies do not have this product of gratuity and pension. That is why we are able to take only from 5 or 6 insurance companies. But that is going to be mandatory. You have to register, and for registering, this insurance is a must. Otherwise, you can get an exemption. Exemption will be granted to a company where more than 500 employees are there. And if you have a separate gratuity fund established under the code, you can have exemption. Otherwise, no exemption to any of the establishment is there. It is mandatory for every establishment to register, and this insurance number is required. Then, as far as this maternity benefit is concerned, there is not much change. The only one change is that, see, I don't know, many of you may be aware, when we have to make the, actually, legally, when we have to make the payment to a insured woman, not insured, but under the Maternity Act, when we have to make. So generally, she goes on leave, we draw his salary. But that is not what the Act says. The existing rule is that whenever she proceeds on leave, you have to pay her 6 weeks salary, that is 1.5 months salary. And the moment you get an information from that lady that she has delivered, you have to pay the balance amount. This is what Act says. But generally, she goes, we draw her salary and credit it to her account. Now that is changed. Now what the code says is that the maternity benefit, 8 plus 18, that is 26 weeks. 26 weeks is the total entitlement. A lady can proceed to maternity leave 8 weeks before the expected date of delivery. So what the code says is, whenever the woman employee proceed on maternity leave, you have to pay her in advance the salary till the date of expected delivery. And within 48 hours of you receive, there is a medical practitioner certificate is to be accompanied. And if she submits that application, intimation to you, the rest of the amount for the balance 26 weeks amount, you have to pay within 48 hours, along with medical bonus of 3,500 rupees. This is what is going to be the change. And the other things are same. It is the 80 days. If she has worked in your company, she is entitled for maternity benefit. So one thing which you have to remember is that this 80 days means what? Whether she has to physically present 80 days? No. Explanation is given in the Social Security Act that all the days of layoff, holidays, leave with the wages are all to be counted for the last 12 months period, these things are to be counted. All put together, if she has 80 days service. If 80 days salary is drawn, she is entitled for the maternity. One more clause, very specifically, it is stated that, see, your establishment is covered under ESI. And the lady is also covered under ESI. But the lady is not entitled because there is a difference between maternity benefit and ESI. ESI, if a woman employee
Sir, block
Maybe
ആയതാണോ?
we lost him. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, Varkichan sir is facing some technical problems, I think.
So the code specifically says, even if she is covered under ESI, and if she is not entitled under those provisions, but entitled under Maternity Benefit Act, till such time she become entitled under ESI, she should be given this maternity benefit under the Maternity Benefit Act. So that is also, that is a very, very important aspect which you have to understand. Then, as far as this employee compensation also, there is not much change is there. Everything is same. But employee compensation, the one thing which you have to understand is that generally people think that if ESI is not applicable, then employee compensation is applicable. It is not like that. If ESI is not applicable, you look at the schedule 2. There the employee is defined. If he is not coming under that definition, he is not entitled for compensation under Employee Compensation Act. Everybody is not. For example, in a hospital, suppose a nurse falls down, she will not get, because she is not defined as a employee under the chapter, not in the schedule. But every person connected with the manufacturing process is an employee. So only one provision additionally brought in this is that in the Plantation Act, there is one provision. Because as per the Plantation Act, you have to give accommodation to the worker. In the Plantation Act, there is one provision that suppose the accommodation which you have provided has collapsed, and injury to either to the worker or to his family members, the employer is liable to pay compensation under Employees Compensation Act. So that was stipulated in the Plantation Act only. So that provision has been brought in specifically to this Employee Compensation Act. Otherwise, the provisions are same. The calculation is based on monthly salary. Maximum salary is 15,000 rupees. Death, yes, there is a calculation that is 50% of the salary multiplied by the relevant factor, or 1.2 lakhs, whichever is higher. Permanent total disability, yes, 60% of the salary multiplied by the relevant factor, or 1.4 lakhs, whichever is. Otherwise, there is not much change in the Employee Compensation Act. Yeah. Then, compared to the code which has been published, and when the rule has come, there is a great consolation. Consolation in the sense with respect to providing crush. In the code, what was stated is that whether male or female, if you have 50 employees, you have to provide the crush. Because actually there were so many different versions. No, probably it may be for the IT company so that the male employee can also bring the children, etc., etc. But when the rules has come, it has been clarified that if there are 50 female employees, women employees only, then you have to provide this crush, not 50 employees. So that is a great consolation. Really, it is a very good clarification which has been given in the rule. Then employee compensation, I told you there is not much change, because employee compensation, the one factor is that up to 2010, there was provision only for compensation. There was no provision for reimbursement of treatment expenses. In 2010, there was a major amendment. 2010 only, the name of the act from workman compensation to employee compensation was changed. And the provision for reimbursement of medical expenses has come. Because, see, there need not be any establishment also for claiming the employee compensation. നിങ്ങളുടെ വീട്ടിൽ ഒരാളെ വിളിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് വന്നിട്ട് അയാളുടെ മെയിൻ്റനൻസിന് വേണ്ടി you ask him to go to the first floor and he falls down above a height of 12 feet, you have to pay the compensation. It is based on the work only the employee is defined. So otherwise, there is not much change as far as the Employee Compensation Act is concerned. Then the claim period is same, that is within 2 years, the employee has to make the claim, or if it is a death case, then 2 years from the date of death, the claim can be raised. Then another change is that, see, nowadays what happens? 7A inquiry starts. Then suppose there is a corrupt officer. He says, I cannot do anything, but I can postpone this for 1 or 2 years. So he reaches an understanding with the employer. He postpones because there is no mandate that he has to finish the 7A inquiry in a stipulated time. Then he gets transferred, another person comes. Another person also will say, oh, it's very difficult to close the case, but I will do one thing. I will get it postponed and postponed. Now the provision has been brought in that once, instead of 7A, both the Provident Fund and ESI, the inquiry is under section 125. 125 section, the inquiry starts, it has to be completed within 2 years. If that officer is not able to conclude within 2 years, he has to submit a report to the Central Provident Fund Commissioner or to the Director General of ESI Corporation, explaining the reason why he could not complete the inquiry. And if he can go through his explanations, the reasons, and he can give some extension. That also there is a limit, that is 1 year maximum is the extension which can be given, or he can order that within 3 months you have to complete, within 6 months you have to complete, but his authority is also limited. He cannot also indefinitely give the time. He can give maximum to 1 year. Then what will happen to all those cases which are pending? That is where we have to take another note of the thing. Now many are facing 7A inquiry. Is there any time stipulated that these 7A inquiries are to be completed within a specific time? Yes. Those 7A inquiries which are in progress are to be, every inquiry has to be completed within 2 years of implementation of this code. If the code is going to be implemented, in April 2021, March 31st, 2023, all 7A inquiries are to be closed, and for which nobody has got authority, not the Central Provident Fund Commissioner, nor the Director General of ESI has got powers to give any extension. It has to be closed. So that is another good move. And even for these employee compensation tribunals, everywhere the government has put some time limits, and for which even the employee compensation inquiry, all these things, what is stated is, if the employer, after receiving the notice, if he has not come, declare ex parte and proceed. If the complainant doesn't come after receiving the notice, declare ex parte and proceed. But one, with all these things, one provision is given. You don't wait. You declare ex parte and proceed and pass the order. But if that employer or the aggrieved person approaches the authority with sufficient reason, within 3 months, yes, he can reopen and hear the case again. Otherwise, that is fine. So the government is trying to close the cases time bound. One of the problem with all these court cases and this delay. So that they are trying to find out some solution. Then another good thing is this compounding of offenses. Compounding of offenses, it is there in all the courts, it is there. So here, the offenses are categorized under 4 headings. It is not there in the code. There is no categorization like that. For your easiness, I am telling you, it's under 4 headings. One is non-payment of contribution, 3-year imprisonment and penalty of 1 lakh. Then second one, I told you, standalone is gratuity non-payment, 1 year imprisonment, 3,000 rupees. Then there are 6 violations, like preventing the inspector, not keeping the registers, etc. That is 6 months imprisonment and 50,000. Then there are other 9 offenses, which is categorized, which is only fine, 50,000 rupees fine, like non-submission of returns, etc. So the compounding provisions are, that is, the compounding can be done even after instituting the prosecution. Even after in the first class magistrate court, the case is filed, you can compound. So what are the provisions? The first provision is that if the penalty contains imprisonment more than 1 year, no composition is possible. So that is why I have told there is only one violation which has got more than 1 year punishment. That is non-payment of contribution. In every other thing, it is 1 year or less than 1 year. So that cannot be compounded. In the entire codes, there are only 2 offenses which cannot be compounded. One is this non-payment of contribution. Another is violation of safety provisions in the hazardous industry under the Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions. Every other offenses can be compounded. Actually, what happened when the code on wages has come? It is not that every offense was compoundable. There it was stated that offenses for which the punishment is only fine, that only can be compounded. But in all the other 3 codes, that has been diluted. That is in favor of the employers, that even if the penalty involves imprisonment, that also can be compounded. But one rider is there, that is that imprisonment should not be more than 1 year. So that's what I told. In the entire 3 codes, other than this code on wages, the more than 1 year imprisonment is only in 2 places. One is this non-payment of contribution, second violation of SARDA sentence. But there is one difference. That difference is with respect to the compounding amount. Suppose there is only fine. You pay only 50% of the maximum fine. Compounding amount. But I told you, if it is more than 1 year, no compounding is possible. But if it is less than 1 year, you can compound, but the amount will be higher. You have to pay 75% of the maximum. Then another condition is that once you compound an offense, then you think that, okay, it is only money. I have enough money, I will pay, do all violations. Don't worry, whatever I say, you do, HR manager, you don't worry. If there is a violation, I will pay the money. No. Once it is compounded, then within 3 years, same offense cannot be compounded. So, with certain stipulations, most of the offenses at the first time, I told you, except these 2, it is compoundable. And they see one good thing or bad thing, I do not know. Probably it may affect us adversely, like motor transport vehicle, that some target is given. See, this compounding money, where do it go? Where does it go? This is whatever money they get by compounding these offenses. As far as central establishments are concerned, it will go to the fund for the unorganized workers' social security fund. And as far as these state government establishments, any amount compounded money will go to state unorganized workers' social security. Nobody is going to take. It will be only to the funds only utilized for the benefit of the workers, but not the workers in the unorganized sector. Then one more thing, then I will conclude and we'll go to the question and answer session. That is, you see, in this Social Security Code, the final section, the last section, section 164. 164 says, as far as the schemes under the Provident Fund, that is Employees Provident Fund Scheme, Employees Pension Scheme 1995, Employees Deposit Insurance Scheme 1976, will remain intact for one year. Unless and otherwise, if any provision is contrary to the provisions of the code, then it will not stand. Otherwise, government is not going to make any scheme immediately. These Employees Provident Fund Scheme 1952, Employees Pension Scheme 1995, Employees Deposit Insurance Scheme 1976 will remain intact. Similarly, the ESI regulations will also remain intact for one more year. So this is generally with respect to this code. Probably some questions will come. At that time, we will definitely go into other details. If time permits, we can, if some other left out portions also can be discussed. Yes, Prashant sir.
So we can move on to the Q&A session now, sir?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think the last part of what Varkichan sir said would make all the HR professionals over here a little bit more alert, understanding, you know, what happens when offenses are committed and the number of years that you can spend in jail and the amount that you'll have to pay for that. I think that itself is an alert for all the HR professionals over here. Thank you so much, Varkichan sir. Now let us move on to the Q&A sessions. We have Vaishag and Smita Nayak, who are our executive committee members of NIPM Calicut Group. They are the moderators for the Q&A session today. So over to you, Vaishag and Smita.
Okay, good evening, sir. Hello.
Yes, Vaishak, we can hear you, but we can't see you.
Okay, 1 minute. Yeah.
Very feeble.
Okay. There are two questions by Mr. Arun Nair. One is LIC's group gratuity cash accumulation plan an approved insurance for gratuity? That is his first question. And his second question is PF payable on maternity benefit?
Second question.
Is whether is PF is payable on maternity benefit?
Oh, yes, definitely. PF is payable on maternity
Okay.
benefit.
And sir, for the first question is LIC's group gratuity cash accumulation plan is an approved plan by approved plan for insurance?
Yeah, it is an approved. See,
Yes.
the purpose is that even if the establishment is closed down, the employee should get the money.
Yes.
So either by insurance or by forming a gratuity fund.
Smita, you there or?
Yeah, okay. The next question is regarding the maternity benefit for the contract female employees, whether the employer is responsible for the payment of maternity benefits. Hello? Can you hear me?
1 minute.
Hello?
Yeah. Now you can speak. Yeah.
Okay.
Whether where
the
an
next question-
employer is responsible
yeah, for the
payment of maternity to. Actually, it is a very good question.
contract female employees.
Yeah. Very good question. See, so far,
Yes.
some of the high courts, like recently the Uttarakhand High Court has had a ruling that yes, contractor employee, if the contractor do not pay the maternity benefit, it has to be paid by the principal employer. But in this Social Security Code, anyway, you have asked a very good question. It has been made very clear because in section 2, there is a definition of woman. And in that, it is clearly stated that woman means a woman engaged through a contract also. Therefore, the maternity benefit, if the contractor is not paying, principal employer is liable to pay, no doubt.
And the next question
Okay.
is from by Ms. Siniji. Will gratuity payable as per new provision on 50% slab is retrospective of prospective effect?
No, once the act comes into effect, then no retrospective, it's only prospective. Prospective means you have to pay from that day onward, whatever the law says you have to pay. It's not that the previous period you apply a different formula, then you apply a different formula after the code has come. No.
Okay. Vaishak, over?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. The next question was regarding JIC or JIC workers, that is part-time apprentice and all. What would be the level of high-level implication coverage? The question was, could you please cover at a high level the implications on JIC workers, part-time apprentice with regard to code on social security?
Good. This is what I told. When the questions come, we can go into the detail. See, let us understand what is the schemes and provision for unorganized workers. Who is this unorganized worker? Who is this big worker? Who is this platform worker? So these are the three categories for which there is no social security which is going to come. So unorganized workers, it is stated that an establishment running by individuals, but the number of employees employed is less than 10. Because the moment it touches 10, you have ESI and other social securities are there. gratuity. So that is one definition. Second thing, somebody is doing his own business, but there one rider is there that central government will decide the income from that activity. Because if a person is earning 1 lakh rupee and doing his own business, he don't require any social security. So that amount is not declared, but subject to the income. Yes, a self-employed person is an unorganized. Then somebody who is doing his own cultivation, agriculture, there it is very difficult to ascertain what is the income. It's very difficult. Therefore, for him, the criteria fixed is what is the extent of cultivable land owned by him. So that is also not declared. Once that is declared, we can find out who are the unorganized workers. Everybody who is not in the organized sector, the rest of the people will be in the unorganized. Gig workers and platform workers, that is in the 7th schedule of this code, there is 9 items are given. 9, they are called the aggregators. Those who are doing the transportation, food delivery, etc., etc. Those who are participating in that activities, they are the gig workers. And then platform workers, it's an online service. Those who are in the online service, they are the platform workers. Now, as of now, no social security scheme is framed. But provisions are already made in the social security code. Who should make and what are the items on which these provisions are to be made. So, as far as unorganized workers are concerned, in the code it is given that for 6 items like life and disability cover, old age pension, etc., the central government will make the scheme and the scheme will be operated by the central government. Then in the social security scheme, another 7 items are given for the state government, for which like provident fund, this accident cover, etc. 7 items are given in the code. You can go through, for which the state government has to make the scheme and the state government will operate the scheme. And the funding can be from the state government, from the central government, CSR fund, and as I told you earlier, the compounding amount and grant from the central government. Then, as far as gig workers and platform workers are concerned, another 6 items are given. It is only the responsibility is of the central government. Because where is the Uber employer? Suppose the state government is made responsible. Where is he? He is in Gurgaon, or he may not be even in the country, but he requires a registration, etc. So what government is planning is based on his turnover, 1% to 5%. It should not be more than 5%. It should not be less than 1%. Probably may start with 1% of his turnover. He has contributed to this fund, and the schemes will be made by the central government, and schemes will be operated by the central government. So this is the broad outlines are already given, but so far no schemes are being made. Once the code come into effect, yes, the schemes will come, it will get operated.
Okay. The next question is by Madam Shefin Salam.
Yeah.
The question is, in the new code, is there any option to voluntarily cover employees with a monthly salary more than 21,000 under ESI scheme?
ESI, though there is a voluntary coverage, the provision has been brought in where less than 10, but more than 21, no. It's only place actually in this that is also removed. The person with disability, he can be covered up to 25,000 rupees, but that provision is not seen in this code. Earlier ESI it was there, and here that provision is there. The person with a disability can be covered, and 3 years contribution the central government will give. Other than that, once he crosses 21,000 rupees at the end of the contribution period, he will be out. There is no provision to further cover it.
Okay, sir. And the next question was from Rakesh Gopal. Are charitable institutions exempted from Industrial Dispute Act?
Actually, it is not a subject matter of Social Security Code, because for Social Security Code, there is no exemption. But the industry is defined in the industry. In Social Security Code, industry is not defined. Only the establishment is defined. Even there is no blanket definition of worker, gig workers, platform workers, unorganized workers, home-based workers, wage worker. Every sort of worker is defined in the Social Security Code, but there is no blanket definition of a worker in the Social Security Code. Employee is defined. What was the question?
Whether the charitable institutions are
Yeah,
covered
charitable
under
institution.
Industrial Dispute.
Charitable institution is exempted from IR Code, not from Social Security Code. If Mada Amridandamayi, if it comes, just to understand, not to name anybody. Suppose they are exempted from IR Code. It doesn't, but there is no exemption from SS Code, Social Security Code. The PF will continue, activity will continue, maternity will continue. The exemption for industry is only from the Industry Relations Code. Actually, that was vehemently opposed by the parliamentary committee. The chairman was vehemently opposed. He said, so why to exempt them? Because you are making an exemption on the ground that it is a charitable institution. Let them do the first charity to their employees. Why should we take away their right to approach the Labor Department or the court if they are terminated, illegally terminated? Let the charity institutions first do charity to their own workers. He has vehemently opposed this proposition, but somehow the government has not accepted it. As now exemption is there in the IR Code, but not in the SS Code.
Okay, next question is by Mr. Hari Krishna. The question is, suppose a contractor who is not having PF or ESI registration is engaged in the factory for seasonal jobs. Can another contractor who is having valid registration of the similar establishment pay their PF and ESI contribution under the new code?
ESI, of course, there is a specific provision in the ESI Act is there. That is, if a person works for more than one employer, there are two things it is stated. Either these employers can make an understanding that I will cover this person under my code, you and we will share the contribution, etc. Suppose they don't do, there is a specific provision in ESI that the corporation can direct one of the employers responsible for the coverage of the employee. That provision is specifically there in ESI. It is there. PF, such a provision is not there. But as long as you cover the employee, if they both make an understanding, some amalgamation or something is there, and you cover the employee, probably PF department will not take any objection, because what is concerned for them is whether he is covered and he is getting benefit, whether he is covered by his own employer or his friend. Probably that is not correct. That is not correct means why he is not taking a code, because there is a provision, even he can take a voluntary coverage. But PF, there is no explicit provision like that. But ESI, there is explicit provision. If an employee works under more than one employer, provisions are very clear cut. It is there. Either employer can make a understanding or ESI corporation can direct one of the employees. PF, actually, there is no such provision is there. Legally, there is no such provision there.
Next question is from Mr. Jitin. It's actually two questions.
Uh,
It is
so
regarding
that-
ESI.
From Jaydeep. So you can take that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Hello.
Yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead. That question is from
Please,
Jaydeep.
please.
You can go ahead.
Okay. The question is for in-law coverage is rupees 9,000 is only for both or one person each. Another thing, if the employee wage increased, if the employee wage is increased and not in ESI coverage, but we use ESI benefits for next 6 months, during this time, is the female employee covered for maternity benefit, even if we are not paying any contribution?
Yes. Well,
So
even-
one is regarding the maternity benefit and
See,
the other
that,
one is law
the
coverage.
first question is very interesting question. That is this 9,000. The 9,000, the Act says the income of the parents, income of the mother-in-law, income of the father-in-law, the all four are alive, all put together, it should not be more than 9,000 rupees. Not only in-laws, parents put together, if it is more than 9,000 rupees, then they will not get. Then as far as benefits are concerned, yes, even after you become out of the ESI, not 6 months, next 9 months, you will continue to get the benefit. But only one thing, that you should have made a contribution in the corresponding contribution period at least for 78 days. If that is there, even if you are out of the ESI, you will continue to get the benefits for next 9 months. Treatment.
The next,
Yeah.
the next it's not a question. It's I is seeking a clarification by Mr. Deepak Gupta. Irrespective of basic more than 15,000 per month, we are deducting PF only on 15,000. I understand that this will stay valid in new code also. Please confirm.
As of now, it is the same thing. Once you make contribution for 15,000 rupees, PF authorities has no right to ask you anything further. His salary may be 1 lakh, his salary may be 50,000. But once you start making contribution on 15,000 rupees, there ends your responsibility, and the PF department cannot ask any question. As of now, even in the code also, that it is the same thing.
So we will enter into the vote of thanks session.
Yeah. Don't.
Sir, there is one last question.
Yeah.
One last question is there.
Please.
Can we just cover that also?
Yes,
Is
yes,
there
sure,
any time
sure,
limit
sure.
for?
With the
Okay,
permission
is
of
there
chairman.
any?
Yeah.
Okay, is there any time limit for initiating prosecution for violations of various provisions
Anyway,
under the code?
this is a wonderful question. I should tell. See, in fact, I have
Absolutely a lawyer.
skipped them. In the entire Social Security Code, I think section 137, it says that unless a prior opportunity is given to an employer, no prosecution is to be taken, including non-contribution of non-payment of contribution. Then you may ask one question. Yes, then what is the difference? Unless there is an explicit provision, suppose they don't give you the opportunity, you cannot go to the court. I have not been given court. The court will ask, where is the provision? There is no. So it is a very good provision introduced. I think it is under section 137, that any violation, including non-payment of contribution, unless the employer is to be given prior this opportunity, and it specifically says it cannot be just you comply tomorrow. No, time is to be given, and even after that, if the employer doesn't do, then only proceed with the prosecution. It should be the last resort. It is very clear, and that is a very good provision.
Okay, that ends our Q&A session. Sir?
Okay, thank you, Smita and Vaishak, for moderating the Q&A session. And as Varkechan sir said, the questions brought in light to more broader areas
Correct.
of the code, and we got to know more about other areas, other aspects as well. So thank you so much, Varkechan sir, for answering all the questions so well, so comprehensively. And now let us move on to the final part of the program, that is the vote of thanks. We have with us the Vice Chairman of NIPM Calicut Group, Mr. Rajesh Kumar. I request you, sir, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Hi, good evening to you all. Indeed, it's another proud moment for NIPM Calicut Group for having this wonderful session on Code on Social Security. We are proud to put forward this learning platform free of any kind of entry fee as our social commitment towards the HR fraternity. The punch or kind of the success of this session is Mr. Varkechan Peta, who is our expert faculty today. He is a speaker instinct who is always passionate for the legal updations and imparting his knowledge unconditionally and brilliantly to the HR fraternity and the generation next. We express our sincere gratitude to Mr. Varkechan Peta on behalf of NIPM Calicut Group and one and all who attended today's session. A big thank you, sir. I express NIPM Calicut Group's sincere gratitude to Laljon sir, who is the chairman of NIPM Kerala chapter. He is always a mentor and advisor for us. It was, in fact, Laljon sir's initiative to revamp the activities of NIPM Calicut Group a couple of years back after he's taking charge of the chairmanship of NIPM Kerala chapter. Thank you, sir. We thank Mr. Anish Aravind, Secretary NIPM Kerala chapter, who is always stand with us as a guide, who visited us many a times at Calicut during these years. Thank you, Anish, for all your support. Our sincere thanks to Gokul of Great HR, who is the official sponsor of this program. Indeed, we value their support a lot for the success of this program. Thank you, Mr. Gokul. We also thank our event partners, Captain Haridas, President of CMA, and his Calicut Management Association team, Kushal Agarwal, President of JCA and his team at Calicut, Mr. Sanju Thomas of Benefigo and his team, who all have been our well-wishers and supporters for making this program a big success. We express our thanks and gratitude for all your supports. We express our sincere thanks to all esteemed members of NIPM Kerala chapter for their guidance and support. Last but not least, respected participant of this program, about 170 professionals were actively participated in today's program. I congratulate all of you for grabbing this learning opportunity and extending all support for the success of this program. My formal thank you for all my colleagues of Calicut Group who all put their efforts to make this learning program a big success. I congratulate Prasant sir, our chairman, and Firoz, secretary, Dinesh ji, Jitin, Anita, Smita, Vaishak, for your leadership and coordination for the last 3 weeks to make this program a memorable one. We will keep we will keep on making wonders for sure. Love you all. Thank you so much.